Hello and welcome. I'm Jeremy. That's Josh. We are the dads of football. We are talking day 3 NFL Combine. Before we dig into it, make sure to hit that DOF button in the corner to subscribe to our channel, like it, like the video, and sit around and hear some good names to watch and what they can do at this NFL Combine. These guys will be going on Saturday. We're going to be starting off with the quarterbacks. First of all, Josh, names that we're not going to be seeing actually participating at the combine. They'll be there. They'll be talking and doing their meetings. We already have people doing meetings right now. Caleb Williams, consensus number 1. Drake May, consensus number 2. And many people think Jayden Daniels out of LSU, number 3. None of them will be throwing. And as far as I know, from what I'm hearing, they're not even going to be tested in terms of measurables or anything like that. They're simply going to be talking to people. Smart or dumb decision on their part?
I think for so many of these quarterbacks over the years, right? Especially the guys that are slotted as your 1, 2, 3 for a 2-3 month lead up into the combine, let alone the draft itself. It makes sense from the standpoint that what they have on tape at this point, at the very least from the last year or two, should be enough, right? A guy like Caleb Williams, who is your consensus one, who everyone believes is a generational talent. And maybe he is, right? Maybe he is. But does he gain anything by going there and standing next to a Drake May, who does not have the amount of time under center in college to really give up that excitement level? He's another North Carolina quarterback, of which both you and I feel like that has been fool's gold now, starting with Trubisky, making its way through Howell, and then into Drake May. Maybe it is a good thing, right? Because now the only comparison will be, what did their pro days look like? What did they look like on tape? Are the guys that cover the ACC right, or are the national heads right, who have been talking about Caleb Williams ad nauseum over the last 2 months? So maybe it's a good decision. I'm disappointed because and you know this about me, I'm a big fan of Jayden Daniels. There's one Heisman Trophy winner, Love. Obviously threw for 4,500 yards last year. Rushed for another 1,200 yards.
Something in that range, yeah.
And put the offense, LSU's offense, on his back. There's something about the excitement of him having been at the combine that I wanted to see. But same thing. Does he really gain anything when the dynamic film from this year might just be enough? So
to me, it's such a dangerous precedent to set where we saw it last year where the number 1 guy didn't throw. And if you're pegging someone as number 1, you're saying he's the guy, he's so good, it's no contest, he's number 1.
Yeah.
All right. If you're going to anoint that person as number 1, they're not going to lose money because they're still going to be the number 1 pick, or, the first one off the board, whatever it is.
Right.
But when you're 2 and 3 and not necessarily like a breakout 2 and 3, especially at number 3, Jayden Daniels,
right.
I just think that's taken a big chance on their part. And again, last year we saw CJ Stroud through. He participated. Yes. He was there. And a lot of people made it question, well, maybe we should have taken him number 1, or maybe he should. And now in retrospect, everyone's like, oh, geez, I wish I would have taken him number 1.
Right.
And are you going to put yourself in that kind of position? And maybe, you know what? If Drake May looked good enough, maybe he would put those doubts in people's mind that, well, maybe this guy should be number 1, especially a doubter like me who doesn't think that he's necessarily going to be all that. That might put some people to rest. Now, granted, they're thrown against air, but when you see people rip off some impressive runs, you see them do some impressive, 40 times that maybe you didn't expect out of them, a la an RG3, you start drooling over those individuals a little bit. And that's the part where I just don't like it, especially at a number 3. I just feel like you have enough people talking about those that will be throwing: Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix, really that next tier, that if they look good, I don't know, if Jayden Daniels isn't careful, maybe one of them jumps the shark a little bit there. Right. I don't know. Now thinking about those guys, Bo Nix, McCarthy, Penix, Are you excited to see all three of them, or is there one in particular? Or is there two that you're looking to stand out from the other?
Yeah, so and you and I have talked about Nix and McCarthy quite a bit in a previous podcast.
Mm-hmm.
McCarthy, I'm not that excited to see throw.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that he's not talented. It's not that he's not gifted. It's not that I don't think he can be a productive NFL quarterback. But I'm more excited about seeing a guy like Bo Nix. I'm more excited about seeing Michael Penix, in spite of the incredible history of injuries that have followed him. Um, Heck, I might even be more excited to see Michael Pratt out of Tulane than I am
Mm.
just about anyone. 6'2", 216, big guy, runs a 4.65. Again, you start to question, who is he playing? But I mean, in his senior year, 11 games, he throws for just 2,400 yards, right? But one of the things out of him is that he has a big arm. And
Mm-hmm.
while he was only a 3-star coming out of high school, right? At least by ESPN and 247, you wonder, can he go there? And not that he's going to jump any of our top three. That's not going to happen with him. He's probably not going to jump a Nix or a McCarthy. However, he's going to turn some heads. And maybe he turns out to be that guy, who can come in and lead a team almost right away. So,
Well, and maybe it's the story of some of those guys that are way down the list
yeah,
that might do something good enough to throw them in a third round or a fourth round category when maybe people were looking at them as maybe a sixth round or
yeah,
seventh round type of talent. Pratt would be one of those individuals, but there's some interesting names down there. I mean, you've got Jordan Travis, that poor guy. He's not going to be competing. I mean, he's still
right.
recuperating from the terrible leg injury that he had.
Yep,
Will be interesting to see what happens to him in his career, though. But Joe Milton, people are questioning
absolutely.
about what talent level he has. You have the old man, Sam Hartman, who I
Yep,
think is like 26 years old at this point. And that's
yep,
not even a joke. I think legitimately he's 26 years
yeah.
old.
Or
Um,
turns 26.
or turns 26. Yeah. And then you've got
Yeah.
different individuals, Devin Leary, and the ghost of Keaton Slovis, which is interesting as well. So is is Keaton Slovis going to look like he did freshman year, or is he going to look like the guy that was a sack of
Right.
potatoes for Pittsburgh? It's interesting that, in my estimation, there's a guy that probably got invited to the combine based on his freshman year.
Yeah. And for me, I think there are a lot of guys that are in that category. And you brought up one, and um, I have to bring him up, and only for the sheer fact that I do think there is something there for him. So Joe Milton the third, you've got a guy who's 6'5", 235, big strong arm, coming out of high school. I mean, coming out of high school, out of Florida. He's a 4-star by ESPN. He's a 3-star by 347. He's a dynamic quarterback. And one of the interesting things in his journey from Michigan to Tennessee is he's been around all kinds of offenses now. He's been around all kinds of coaches, right? And he's not just a stationary pocket quarterback. He's shown the ability to throw off his spot, to make accurate throws on the run. Again, not saying he's going to be a big name. Maybe he's a 4th-round guy, 5th-round guy. Who knows what he'll end up being? But he's shown pocket awareness. He's shown quick acceleration in his throwing motion. He's shown the ability to throw the ball all over the field. And for that reason, right, and that quick release, I wonder what a guy like that can be and can do if given the chance in the right offense.
Here's the problem with Milton, and it's going to be very similar to some of my knocks on Williams, which we'll cover when we get closer to the draft.
Yes.
Milton goes, he doesn't play in the bowl game, and you have Nico Iamaleva playing in his stead, and he just absolutely trounces my poor Iowa
Yes.
Hawkeyes, destroys them. He runs for touchdowns, he throws for touchdowns, and I'm looking
Yeah.
at this guy going, oh my God, you might be a first rounder in the next 2 years.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So that's the comparison that I'm making.
But I think one of the things that oftentimes maybe gets dismissed or missed, or however we want to phrase it, right? You have these guys that play in these explosive systems, right? Where in a bowl game where they have nothing to lose, they know they're going to be the starter next year. You get to take some shots that, one, maybe you don't normally take, okay? But also, two, no one's prepared for you. So to your point, like,
Iowa wasn't
yes,
for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Correct. And I think for Joe Milton, there is some skepticism there, right? You've got this sky high natural ability, but can you actually grasp the quarterback position? Is that something he's going to be able to do? Um, so to that end, that's why I get a little bit excited about that idea. So
Last word I'm going to give to you. You want to say anything about Spencer Rattler?
Spencer Rattler is one of those stories that I appreciate, right? You got a guy that wants to keep playing quarterback. He wants to find his way around. I understand he's a mobile quarterback, right? But, and you and I have talked about this actually quite a bit. He's listed as just about 6'1". Runs a 4.8 40, right? Which Cam Newton ran right around 4.8. Andrew Luck ran around 4.8. But those guys are 6'3", 6'4", right? And not to say that Spencer Rattler isn't talented. However, let's say that last year he throws for 3,200 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. That doesn't jump off the page for me with any level of excitement to think that he's going to prove doubters wrong, right? Starts in 2019 at Oklahoma, limited action, right? Or started his career, I should say. But then he bounces around in South Carolina, ends up being where he ends up. And was he really that? Has he proven the ability to play quarterback at a high enough level and withstand whatever pressure he's going to feel from a pass rush that 4.78 is fast, but you're 6 foot. You're going to get knocked off your spot just as easily, if not more so, than most of our college quarterbacks that are a little undersized compared to NFL stars today.
In terms of ability and size, here's who comes to mind when I think of Spencer Rattler. Chase Daniels.
Absolutely.
That's the guy. That's
Yeah.
who he is to me. And it's the same type of quarterback. And I'll say this about Spencer Rattler. He was successful in college. I mean, he
Yes.
wasn't necessarily in the 4,000 yard range, but he did 3 years of 3,000 yards, which is
Absolutely.
still pretty impressive. But yeah, you throw that now into the NFL system, a guy that's that short, maybe a little bit limited in physical
Right.
ability, that's Chase Daniel. And if you could make
Yes.
your career as a backup for 7, 8 years in the NFL, then cool, man. That's who you're going to be. You're going to be someone's
Right.
backup for, if you could go 6 or 7 years in the NFL as someone's backup, that's the success rate. With that being said, you're probably still looking at like a, what, I don't know, a 6th round draft grade on a guy like that.
Probably. I mean, the one thing that people are going to love is that he, over 1,300 pass attempts in his career, right? 4 years as a starter, dealt with adversity, overcame those things. You and I have talked about another player with a long history of starting in college and what he's been able to do this year with the Niners and Brock Purdy, right? And I'm not saying they're the same quarterback. I'm just saying, does all of that time being a leader of a huddle going to lead to success in the NFL? Or to your point, is he a backup? Is he a Chase Daniel? So it's going to be interesting considering he's got the accuracy, he's got the arm strength, he's willing to take shots all over the field. However, there's just something that it just doesn't fit for me. And I watched South Carolina play a decent amount this year, and there was at no point in time was I blown away by thinking, okay, Spencer Rattler is going to be that guy. He just doesn't fit that ideal QB mold. So I'm curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah, which is too bad because he had a pretty decent receiver with him too, but that'll be in 2 positions from now. Running back. Running back is deep. I think deeper than maybe people realize. And I'll put it this way. When I look at my running back list, I've got what do I have? 10 running backs that I like. 10.
Yeah.
There's 10 guys to me that could end up being number 1 running backs in the NFL someday. Now, the running back position isn't what it once was, but when I mean, if you look at even the NFL breakdown, I've got Braylon Allen as like one of my lower tier running backs, and the guy's a beast, and I think he's fantastic.
He's 6'2", he's 245 pounds, and he runs a 4.4 40. I mean, he's a tank,
He's a physical
um,
specimen. Yeah.
he really, really, really is in every sense of the, in high school, he ran a shuttle of 4.65, right? That's an elite time. And you know how I feel about the shuttle, right? Straight line's
Mhm.
fun for the combine and everybody likes to watch it, but there's something about watching a guy, especially a running back, have to change directions, change speeds, and be fluid in doing so. And he is that at that size. So, not saying he's Derrick Henry, not in no way am I
Yeah.
claiming that, but I mean, he's exciting. I mean, he's exciting. He, again, has
I'm
always been touted as a fantastic player.
I'm gonna save my energy, and I hate to be negative, and I'm not one of those guys that likes to be negative, but I'm gonna be negative about one person here on this list. I look at the NFL and what their scouts and their little analysis put together, and I like so many of the names up there. Jonathan Brooks, number one, I think is the clear number one.
Yep.
I'm gonna skip Jalen Wright. I'm gonna go straight to Trey Benson. I like him. Marshawn Lloyd is good, but never really lived quite up to the hype. So there's a question mark there. I love Bucky Irving. I like Audra
Yep.
Gesme. I like Will Shipley. I like Blake Corum. In the
No love for
middle
Ray
of,
Davis.
I like Ray Davis. I'm not completely sold on Ray Davis. A little bit later for Ray Davis, but I'm not going to trash Ray Davis. I think he could be
Yeah.
solid, but he's a rotational running back for me. There's a name in there in the NFL's list, and I'm just like, I'm scratching my head. I'm rubbing my temples. I'm trying to figure out how much money did Tyrone Tracy Jr. pay to get on this list. I don't know. And I get it. People, if you're watching this, you're going to say, "Oh my God, oh of course Jeremy doesn't like him. He's an Iowa guy." And where did Tyrone
Yeah.
Tracy Jr. come from? Iowa, and he transferred out. I was
Right.
fine with him transferring out because he didn't do a whole lot on Iowa. And when he did play for us, he played as a receiver. He didn't play as a running back. And
Right.
listen, for Purdue, he had a pretty good season, but a pretty good season was 700 yards rushing. It wasn't
Right.
like he's this big behemoth. He's got decent size, but for a guy that's listed as 5'11, 210, he's probably the smallest 5'11, 210 I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I I,
You know,
I think he's an athlete, but he's not going to be one of my top 7 or 8 running backs.
well, the question starts becoming with him, right? Is he going between the tackles? Is that something he has the ability to do?
No,
You
he
know,
doesn't.
and and I don't think he's ever shown that. And
No.
and you wonder if a guy like that, other metrics start getting in the way of looking at him logically and looking at the film behind him. Uh, I have to be honest, and you've heard me say this, and I love the story behind this guy. And this is in no way, shape, or form intended to be a slight on him. I'm also, and I've told you this, I'm not a big Blake Corum guy. I'm just
Mhm.
not. I understand where he comes from. I understand the talent. I know he runs a 4.38. That's exciting, right? Rare combination. I understand all of that. Lateral movement, fantastic. He's 5'8", 213 pounds. And is that
Yeah.
what he's going to carry into the NFL? Um, again, talented player. Enjoyed watching him play at Michigan. However, there's just a part of me that's just not certain, right? 218 carries for a little over 1,000 yards and 24 touchdowns. But is that the byproduct of an efficient offense that gave him the opportunity to score? You know, so
Here's my comparison to a guy like that. First of all, I'm going to go back to Tyrone Tracy. I think teams want him to
yeah,
be a Wandale Robinson type of guy,
yeah,
but he's too slow. And not that he's slow. I mean, he's still a guy that's actually pretty fast, but he doesn't have the quickness of a Wandale Robinson or
no,
the straight line speed. He's fast, but he's not that fast. That's
right,
my thing on him. You're crazy if you think he's a top 5 running back. Um,
right,
as far as Corum, do you remember Jamal Anderson, running back from Atlanta?
of course,
He reminds me a little bit of him, a guy that could be good,
yeah,
but a guy that's undersized and maybe tries so hard to bulk himself up that he actually slows himself down a little bit. Now I'll say this about Blake Corum. I've seen his lifting. The dude benches crazy weight,
he's a
but
freak,
at the same time, are you going to stack so much muscle onto you that you make yourself like a little brick and you actually kind of, you know, bulk up yourself to the point where you can't even move the
right,
way you once did? Because he has tight hips. He's not very
right.
flexible. He's this
Doesn't
little
appear,
muscle bound, ball of energy, but I
right.
don't see that springiness that you want to see from a guy that size.
if I'm going to look at a dual role back, if I'm going to look at guys that they're hoping can do other things because they're not that big bodied guy, catch the ball out of the backfield, all those things. I'm sorry, and this is going to be a relative hot take. I'm going to go with Rasheen Ali from Marshall. He
Mm.
excites me significantly more. And again, I'm trying to take it easy on Blake Corum. I recognize who he is. Again, love the story, but I like the 5'11", 204 guy who runs a 4.4 more than I do Corum. And I think that's a guy who could be a dark horse who ends up being given a shot, right? Rushed for over 1,000 yards, 201 carries last year, 5.1 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns. However, 5 fumbles, right? But 27 receptions for 207 yards and a
Mhm.
Marshall offense that gave him the opportunity to do so. I understand that. But there's, to me, if I'm going to go with the guy that I might think is undersized, maybe not by height in his case, but maybe by weight, I'm going that direction. There's to me, I'm excited about a guy who's played 3 or 4 years in an offense and has shown nothing but elite athletic skill the entire time. So
If you're gonna find a diamond in the rough, lower in the running backs, I think you can find a guy that might be able to pop out and be something. Um,
yeah,
like Ali, like you just said. Receivers, obviously, we talked about this in our last video with cornerbacks. You have a position where there's more people on the field that play that position, so you're
right.
going to have a ton of depth. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's no surprise here. I mean, you talk about the top three. You could have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys on this one. I mean, Marvin
Yes.
Harrison Jr., I think, is everybody's number one. Malik Neighbors, I think, is everyone's number two. And I think Adunze is everyone's number three.
Yeah.
Um, it's after the top three that I get very interested. Brian Thomas Jr. doesn't have
Yep.
much experience playing receiver, still had 1,000 yards playing next to Neighbors. I think
Amazing.
he is a fascinating individual. I think he's raw and has the highest ceiling out of any receiver in the draft. But there's
Wow.
so many other guys that I like. I say that I think he is the highest. I look down the list and I see Keon Coleman out of Florida
Yes.
State, and
Yes.
he's like not even in the top 10. And I'm like, all right, let's bring him up maybe to what, 1, 2, 3, 4. I could see him being anywhere between 5 and 9, to be quite honest
Yes.
with you. He's better than
Yes.
a lot of guys there. I might rather have Keon Coleman than Adonai Mitchell, to be quite honest with you.
I mean, Keon Coleman, you're talking about an outside receiver. He's 6'4", 215, runs a 4.45. He's a man, he's a very large man. In that same Marvin Harrison kind of, metrics when you talk about size, it was dynamic as a sophomore receiver. I mean, it again, you start looking and going, is it the offense? Is it the quarterback? He strikes me as the kind of player that's going to sneak up maybe in that like George Pickens kind of range, right? That George Pickens kind of mold. I am incredibly excited. Funny you say him because I was literally just looking at some of my notes on him. Love Keon Coleman. Love to see what he's going to be able to do as an X receiver in the NFL once he gets there.
Well, and here's the thing too. If you want, and not even to say a project, but if you want
Right.
a receiver that has the potential to turn into a 1 or 2, there are so many names there. I mean, you can go way down the list. I have to go
Yeah.
way down. We were talking about Spencer Rattler, and I said there's a pretty good receiver. You have Xavier Leggett, and he
Yes.
is like buried on this list, which shocks me because I think he's a guy that has some real potential. Xavier Worthy out of Texas,
Yep.
real potential. Jalen
Yep.
Polk out of Washington, potential. Um, Jalen McMillan,
I was gonna
tons
say you
of
can't leave out
potential.
McMillan.
McMillan, I love him. And you
Yes.
can keep going down, down, down. I mean, Jacob Cowing out of Arizona.
Yep.
Um, Johnny Wilson won't be a great receiver, but to see a guy that's 6'7" running down the field would just be fun. So I mean, you got a ton of receivers here.
Yes.
I gotta say, you could go really deep and find yourself some decent dudes. Where if I have some extra picks in the 6th round and I just need a number 4, even a number 5 spot,
Yes.
boom, there's a guy for you.
Yes. Well, I mean, you've got even guys like Jamari Thrash out of Louisville, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who, granted, the speed isn't quite what we were saying for some of the other guys. He's more of a 4.5 guy, but he's 5'11, 185. He's shown the ability to go across the middle. He's shown the ability to go deep, in his 5th year at Louisville. 63 catches for 855 yards. And again, you're talking about guys down there at the bottom of the list, but it will be exciting to see what happens. And to your point, I love it. He goes to Georgia State. Thrash goes to Georgia State, ends up at Louisville. I mean, it's just so many guys. And that's the great thing about the receiver position now is you have these dynamic athletes that are all over the country who they're going to show up. They're going to be at the combine. They're going to show you what they can do, and they're going to pop up on people's boards, whether it's a 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round. You're going to get production. And that, to me, that's what's so exciting about, the modern NFL, but also these players coming out of college who are being given the opportunity to catch the ball as often as they do.
There is a lot of names thrown out there on every single one of those positions. Watch what they do. Combine on Saturday. That's what we're looking for. Josh, thank you as always, and I'll talk to you next time.
Yes, sir.